on the national stage, Tom DeLay was the former House Majority Leader, the second-ranking leader in the United States House of Representatives. During his last year as leader, DeLay successfully led the House to pass the most ambitious and conservative legislation they had ever seen. Thank you very much. When DeLay decided to leave Congress in 2006, he immediately went to work researching how Democrats have built their outside operations and massive political coalitions. Despite repeated Democrat attempts to drive him out of politics, DeLay has thrived in a new arena with the sole goal to help conservatives, whether through new or previously existing organizations, work together to drive their message. As the founder of First Principles, LLC, a DC-based consulting firm, DeLay works with a range of political organizations in the fields of grassroots, new media, communications, and issue advocacy, as well as giving strategic advice to political committees, candidates, and elected officials. In addition to his business and political work, DeLay travels around the country speaking to conservative organizations like ours, Republican events, and college campuses. And he told me while we were eating pizza tonight that he is very excited to be here with this group because of what we do. And he said, we have worldwide recognition. I'm willing to take Tom DeLay's word for that. Tom has written 2 books. One is called No Retreat, No Surrender, One American's Fight, and recently, Revival, Revolution, Rebirth, which calls for a spiritual revival for a revolution for the Constitution.
Amen.
Yay.
Please welcome Tom DeLay.
That is so nice. I was telling Fran I wasn't blowing smoke when I said that. I mean, I am so excited. I have been wanting to come to this group for years because of your reputation, and I'm not kidding one bit. That there have been times, as I travel all over the country, talking about spiritual revival for a revolution for the Constitution. And some people bring up at some particular part of the program examples of where the Northeast Tarrant County Tea Party has done something outstanding, and people are taking notice of it, and your activism and your energy and your commitment. It's just phenomenal. And I'm here tonight to encourage you to keep doing it. Don't back off. Grow. You are becoming a political powerhouse. Even I was where was I? I was at the Republican Women's Club. I think it was the Memorial Park Republican Women's Club in Houston about a month ago. And I happened to mention that I was coming here, and they were just so excited that this Tea Party has done such incredible work in what you're doing, and you're on the cutting edge. I really don't need to give you a speech. You know everything I'm about to say. Now you may disagree with some of it, and if you do, we're going to have. Actually, I'm going to change it just a little bit. Usually, I want to talk to you and give you the reasons why, and I brought my book. If you want to buy a copy of the book, I'll sign it after this program. But this, you can start this meeting with a prayer service, and so you get it that God needs to be put back into the public square. But as I say in my book, spiritual revival must lead to a revolution that will once again produce a constitutional republic. A constitutional republic, exceptional in its freedom, its opportunity, its peace, and its security, ladies and gentlemen. Because I am convinced, and what I want to do tonight is to try to convince you a little bit about what I've written in the book, but I also want to take that and apply it practically so that you can see what I'm talking about, because we are constantly looking at certain issues. Give you an example, the last presidential race. Talked about issues. No vision, no constitutional revolution, no God in the public square, nothing from 30,000 feet. It was immigration, it was trade, it was, it was issues. But we desperately need someone that can give us a visionary. Now, I'm not anti-Trump. I'm very excited about some of the stuff he's done already in regulation. He's supposed to come up with a spending program this week that's supposed to drastically cut spending. The problem I have with that is he just talks about discretionary spending, which is only about 30% of the total budget, and won't touch entitlements. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that after tonight you will demand from your congressman to get rid of the whole notion and process of entitlements. It is unconstitutional. Entitlements are unconstitutional. They should at least be budgeted every year. But it's always used as an excuse that you can't touch entitlements. Well, yes, you can. There's a lot of things you can do to reform it without even getting rid of it. But the point is that entitlements as a process is a Democrat-designed program to keep you from getting touched the spending programs. And so my point is that I want to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about issues as it applies to what I'm trying to convince you of. But at the same time, and more importantly, I want to have a discussion with you, because I can learn from you. And I want to, whether you agree with me or not on anything that I say tonight, let's have a discussion. And I hope we can do that. I'm going to keep my eye on the clock so that we definitely will have time for discussion. Let's have a discussion. Because at the end of the night, I'm hoping to convince you that you need to sit down and write out an agenda that's important to you, on the federal level, on the state level, on the county level, and on the city level. And I hope that you will write that, and then you will invite these candidates to come stand before you, and you present them with what is important to you. And then you demand that they deliver, or you won't support them. In fact, if they won't do what you want them to do, I hope you will recruit a candidate against them. That's the only way that we're actually going to make things happen. It's happening. You have had a major part to play in it, starting in 2010, the election 2010, when all those Tea Party people were elected, 2012, 2014, now 2016, and we still have a so-called president that's going to shake up Washington, and I'm very excited about that. But you need to be involved, because how is he going to shake it up? The details of the policy are important. Julie was just talking about rhino care, and when I'm going to get into it as an example of violating the Constitution, not paying any attention to the Constitution. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, I believe strongly that if we don't change, without a rebirth of putting God in the public square and the Constitution as the main foundation of all the decisions that our elected officials have, America will die. It won't die from some revolution. It won't die from an outward. It will die from within, a dissolution of this country, because we are undermining the spirit and the soul of this country. Now, I don't know if we're at the point of no return. Who knows? Only God knows. But I think we are close. It could be 20 years, it could be 30 years, it could be 50 years. These things take a long time. Look how long it's taken to get to where we are today. 2010, 12, 14, now 16. And believe me, you're going to have another election, probably to repeal Obamacare. And get some more senators in there that have backbone. But my point is that this country has a pattern and a process by which it was created. God created this country. There was a spiritual revival, as you all know, for 30 to 40 years before the Revolution. God was at the center of our society. God was at the center of people's education. God was at the center of people's worldview. It all started with religious liberty and people seeking religious liberty. God and the Bible was central to everything that was going on in our society. Then it started heating up, and our pastors started preaching from the pulpit the connection of God and to government. And it grew, and it grew, and it became more and more important. But God was at the center. Everybody that went to college, all these wonderful colleges, Princeton, Harvard, they were all seminaries. And that's where people got, the intelligentsia got their worldview. They studied Montesquieu, John Locke, and other philosophers. And so that's what they studied. And central to all of it was the Bible. The Bible was used as a central teaching tool in elementary school, what we would call elementary school, in high school, and even in universities. It was central to everything that we were doing. Therefore, as we moved closer to the revolution, God was at the core of society in this country. And that's why God became the core of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence, you ought to go read it again if you haven't read it in a while. And go back to the abuses of George III. You can read those abuses and you can pick out things that our government is doing to us today. The tyranny we're getting from our own governments is happening today. And what they complained about in the Declaration of Independence, but at the center of the Declaration of Independence was God, mentioned 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. And at the center of that was God giving us our unalienable rights. God gave us the rights. The Constitution was written to protect those rights. The Constitution was not written to give us rights. Let me give you a quick example. Nancy Pelosi last week, she said it 1,000 times if she said it once, that health care is a right. Show me in the Constitution where health care is a right. Nowhere. Therefore, it's unconstitutional. And ladies and gentlemen, so you can see that when this country was created, it was created with God at the center, and God-centeredness, and God being at the core of the Constitution. Now, it started changing in the 1880s. People think it's only been a few decades that it's been changing. No, it started changing in the 1880s. When the same education started removing God from the education of our, especially in our intelligentsia, it became cool to go to Europe to study Marx and Engels and all these wacko communist socialist wackos, and they brought all of that back to our universities, back to our schools, back to our government, and they went to work. Most people who praise Theodore Roosevelt as a wonderful president, he was our first progressive president because he violated the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution says that the federal government can own property. And he started buying up property like it was nobody's business all over the world. I mean, all over the United States and even outside the United States. And then Woodrow Wilson and others were starting to get elected. And that creep, that socialist creep, now I call them Babylonists. You know, they try to confuse us because we don't know what to call them. We call them progressives, we call them leftists, we call them communists, we call them socialists. I call them Babylonists. Because if you listen to the story of the Tower of Babel, it wasn't about a building to touch the heavens. It was about man putting himself on the throne and kicking God off the throne. That is what is happening with the left, the progressives, and others. They have worked and actually specifically written how to take God out of society, and they have worked all this time to where he's pretty much gone. Yeah. Pretty much gone. And then the next step is to make sure that they take control of our judiciary so that they can undermine the Constitution and rewrite the Constitution and call it the living document that should evolve. You know, they got all that from Darwin, evolution. Well, not just with animals, but with politics. The evolution. Woodrow Wilson wrote a lot about the evolution of the Constitution, and the Constitution should protect society and not man, when in actuality the Constitution is about protecting individuals and the rights of individuals. And yet we've completely shredded all that. How does this manifest itself in where we find ourselves today? Now, I'm not standing up here to criticize Trump, but I have to say that Trump, when he was elected, I voted for him because voting for him and electing him stopped Hillary. That's why I voted for him. But the point is that here is a man that some say they have led him to Christ. So at the very best, he is a baby Christian. And secondly, he knows nothing about the Constitution. Let me tell you two quick stories about my own personal life that led me to write this book and use my experience in politics, which was actually almost 35 years in elected office. I got elected in 1978 for the first time as a state representative in Fort Bend County outside of Houston. And I was the first Republican ever elected in that county. And that may sound like a big deal, but it was a big deal. Because in Fort Bend County, they shot Republicans. They did back in those days. I'm not kidding. They had two parties in the Democrat Party, the Woodpeckers and the Jaybirds. If you ever want some interesting political reading, read about the Jaybirds in Fort Bend County. After the War of Northern Aggression, they created the Jaybirds were created within the Democrat Party, who controlled the politics in that county, and to keep blacks from holding office during Reconstruction. And the Woodpeckers were black sympathizers, and the Jaybirds and the Woodpeckers used to have gunfights. Literally had gunfights in front of the courthouse. You can go down there every time they have a gunfight. A few years later, they put up a monument to the gunfight. So we got monuments all over the place for the gunfight. There were still some Jaybirds around when I ran as a Republican in 1978. So I'd like to say I was a badge of courage, but I never told anybody I was a Republican. I was on nothing in my literature or anything like that. I was running as Tom DeLay. But after the primary, I had to start telling people, because they thought in those days in Texas, if you won the Democrat primary, you were elected. And so I had to start telling people that I was a Republican in those days, and it was pretty rough. But as God would have it, my opponent was so bad that they were at least open to talking to this crazy guy that was running as a Republican. I lived in a little town of 400 people called Simonton. Didn't know a soul in the district, but I knocked on 18,000 doors myself. And I got a book on how to run a campaign. I literally ran a textbook campaign. And I'm one of those weirdos that reads instructions before you put things together. And so, but they'd never seen a textbook campaign, and we stuck up on when I won. The point I tell you is I'm elected state representative. I'm 31 years old. Man, am I full of myself. I am somebody. And so I had that kind of arrogant, I used to call it Texas cocky, but I was one of the most arrogant people you could imagine. I'm still working on it. But so I go to the state legislature and I spend 140 days in my first session. I'm thinking, wow, this is something. I come home to my Rotary Club and I'm strutting into the room. I just finished my first session, and it was a pretty successful session, and I knew everybody wanted to touch me. And the program that day, the first Rotary Club after the session that I go to, the program that day were 5 seniors that were studying the Constitution. Back in those days, in 1978, there was a guy named Cleon Skousen from Utah, that a multimillionaire, that put up money for scholarships for students as an extracurricular activity to study the Constitution. And when they reached a certain level, they would get a $250 scholarship. So these kids come to my Rotary Club, and the first thing out of this beautiful senior's mouth was, how many amendments are there to the Constitution? Thank God she didn't ask for hands. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know the answer to that question. I took her course. And I've been studying the Constitution ever since, and the Constitution has been a foundation of my political career, to the point that when I finally got into leadership, I made members answer the question, this bill you want me to bring to the floor, is it constitutional? And then we'd have a discussion about whether it was constitutional or not. But the point is that over the 35 years of political life, everywhere I went, I would, and I'm speaking to presidents, U.S. senators, state legislators, members of Congress, I'd sort of get out the question, how many amendments are to the Constitution? I didn't keep exact records, but I can tell you less than 20% of your elected officials know how many amendments there are to the Constitution, much less how many articles, much less what it means. That's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. That's a real problem. Not only that, but, and I'll take out the last election or two, but solid Christians that will stand unashamedly for Jesus Christ are not running for office like they should. I have worked my entire career with people like Chuck Colson and Will Bright and many others trying to get Christians out of that church building and into the streets so that we can put God back into the public square. Because God will never be put back into the public square unless we individually understand the relationship with Jesus Christ and we exhibit that wherever we are, and certainly outside the church building. And you've heard it said, our government, our Constitution, our state constitution, our city government, our county government was designed for a good people. And it is not a good people who defines their own truth.
Amen. Yeah.
God has given us the revealed truth through the Bible, and we have to take that revealed truth and apply it to everything we're doing. Most importantly, as your mission statement is to focus on putting God back on the throne and taking man off that throne. How do you do that? How do you do that in politics? Well, I can tell you many different ways, but I want to touch on three different things. One, let's start with Rhino Care. Ladies and gentlemen, let's think back just a little bit. Before they passed Obamacare, every American got health care.
That's right. That's right.
Now, not every American had health insurance, but it's law. Every American, when they walk into a doctor's office, in the emergency room, whatever, cannot be turned away. Now, I don't know if that's constitutional or not, but it is the law. And every American. Now, I don't know about, maybe you ought to study the Fort Worth Dallas Metroplex, but in Houston, our indigents were taken care of. We have clinics all over the place for the indigent in a metroplex of over 8 million people. We have a beautiful charity hospital called Ben Todd. Maybe they weren't taken care of like you and I would be taken care of using our insurance, but they got health care. So there was no reason other than control and dependence for the Democrats to pass Obamacare. They want to control you. They want to control everything about you. It is the Baptist way. It's slavery. It is the battleless ways. And we all know what they ultimately wanted was a national health care system, a single-payer system where you take Medicare, Medicaid, and all insurance and put it all into one government-run program. That's what their ultimate goal was. So they passed Obamacare, brand new entitlement program. It's failing because of socialism fails. Ultimately, it may take 100 years, but ultimately redistribution of wealth fails. Well, theirs failed a little quicker than others because they did such a horrible job at putting together Obamacare. But the point is that from the time they passed Obamacare throughout, and I'm pretty sure you said it loud and clear, you wanted the repeal of Obamacare.
Yep.
You notice I didn't say and replace it. Did this organization ask to replace it?
No.
You wanted it repealed. Guess who added replacement? The Republican leadership in the House and the Senate to cover their political behinds. Because they knew what was coming, and we witnessed it in the last few weeks. The number one question is, how many people are you going to knock off Obamacare? 14 million? As said today by CBO. You know, it was really interesting. Over the last 6 years, there's been almost more than that, 50 million people that have lost their care, lost their doctors, and nobody seems to care. But all of a sudden now, we're hearing about those that have a failed system might be knocked off that failed system. And the press is going right along with it. And the leadership is saying, no, we can't just repeal, we got to replace it. Now, I knew the minute they said that what they were doing. I knew that we would arrive to where we are today. I knew because when they said replacement, that implied that they're going to use the federal government to hold on to welfare insurance policies. And what did they pass out of committee this last week? A welfare system. Paid for by tax credits. Now, they don't define tax credits to you. But when they say refundable tax credits, you know what that means? We have it today. Most people don't know. It's called Earned Income Tax Credit, where people, the working poor, get a check. They don't pay taxes. They don't pay income taxes, but they file, and they get a check from the government as a refund. Did you know that? No, it goes up to almost $4,000. It's $400 to $4,000 at refund check that you take out of your pocket and send to the working poor. That's what they're talking about. And they're talking about, and I'm trying to clear this up because the way I read the bill is they're calling it advanceable, refundable tax credit. What that means is you get your money to pay for your insurance policy in advance from the federal government. You get a check. Now, it's supposed to go to the insurance company, but they're talking about a check for $4,000 to $14,000 per month to pay for insurance. That's the Republican plan. They also have in there a slush fund of $100 billion as a what do you call it when we bail? As a bailout for insurance companies. $100 billion. And then they let Medicare expansion go on for 2 or 3 more years, which means it'll never go away. If you don't cut it off right now, you'll never get rid of it. Because you've got 30-something governors that love that Medicaid money coming in so that they can cut ribbons and stuff to pay for indigent care. It'll never go away. This is not repeal of Obamacare. And you should be in the streets right now screaming. Julie, where are you going to go? I noticed you're going to meet at Sessions' office. Yes. And boy, you've got to be there and you've got to bring your people there. They need to hear from you that you demand the outright repeal. If you want to replace it later, then let's talk about it later. But you promised to repeal Obamacare, and it takes a one-page bill.
That's right.
One-page bill. Obamacare is hereby repealed. Now why? Why? Because, as I state, the reason that you want to repeal it is because it's unconstitutional.
That's right.
There is nothing in the Constitution that allows the federal government to be involved in health insurance. And for those of us that are on Medicare and Social Security, as I am, I'm 70 years old, it's unconstitutional too, by the way. It's unconstitutional for the federal government. Now, if the states want to do it, if the states want to put everybody on welfare, then they could go do it. And it would be constitutional. I would hope they would do it in the spirit of the Constitution and understand the whole philosophy behind the fact that people, if you give somebody something that they didn't work for, it means nothing to them. And if they are dependent on somebody, they lose their dignity and everything that is good about them. And that's why we're having so many social problems as we're having today. The second thing is, when you get home tonight, would you just do me a favor? Pull up on your computers, or if you carry around the Constitution like I have for 35 years, read Article 3 again. Article 3 creates the judiciary. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're not focusing on, that the left is focusing on, that the Baptists are focusing on, is they're going to make sure that they turn the judiciary into a legislative body. They're going to be suing on everything. And you know what? We have a lawless judiciary in this country, and have had a lawless judiciary in this country for over almost 100 years. And God bless him, I love Scalia, and I love Clarence Thomas. I don't think much about Kennedy, but the point is that our judiciary has been lawless and violated the Constitution, and we've allowed them to get ripped by with it for years upon decades. It is now time to stop it.
Yeah.
Let me give you a quick example. The President of the United States, by statute, is given the authority to regulate immigration. It's very clear in the law passed by Congress. It's very clear. What did President Trump do? He puts out an executive order, totally legitimate. He could cut off all immigration tomorrow if he wants to. Now, it may upset some people in Congress, and he'll probably get some flack politically. But the point is that travel ban was totally constitutional. And so they shop for a judge. They find this wacko liberal up in the state of Washington. He totally disregards the Constitution. And if you read his ruling, there's nothing about the law or the Constitution in the ruling. There's nothing there. He should be impeached. He should be impeached. Then that would send a shockwave through the judiciary. But what did Trump do? Doesn't know enough about the Constitution. Know that he can just ignore that judge, and he can ignore the Ninth Circuit. Read Article 3. Let me point out a few things. In Article 3, most people don't know this, the Supreme Court is the only court created by the Constitution. And by the way, it doesn't have a number of justices on it. So when everybody was saying, oh, we got to elect Trump because we needed a justice. No, we could go with 7, 8. Our first Supreme Court was 6. We don't have, nothing that says that we have to have 9. Congress says how many they have, the power of the purse. All the other courts on the federal system is appointed, is created by the Congress, the power of the purse. Therefore, they can uncreate those courts. In fact, my last year as majority leader, I passed out of the House of Representatives a bill that broke up that Ninth Circuit, that radical liberal circuit. And you know what I did? I took their jurisdiction and spread it to other circuit courts. Then I told them, it's in the bill, I told them that I can't get rid of the judges, but I told them that if they ever wanted to meet, they could meet in Guam. And there would be no money for staff or programs. It shocked Republicans. We can do that? We passed it out of the House, couldn't get it through the Senate, and then out of Congress. The other thing that's in Article 3 that's very interesting is that the Congress can regulate the courts.
That's right.
The Congress can tell the courts what cases they can and cannot hear. Look, I passed 5 bills out my last year's majority leader to make this point. 5 bills, I told them you couldn't hear a case on prayer in schools. You couldn't hear a case on 10 Commandments on Courthouse Square, at the courthouse. You couldn't hear a case on the nativity scene, the Courthouse Square. You couldn't hear a case on burning the flag. It drove them nuts, them being the Supreme Court. Literally drove them nuts. I don't have time tonight. It's in the book if you want to buy it. It's a wonderful story about the people's, the members of Congress's eyes got that big when we brought those bills out on the floor. And they, you know, again, they said, we can do that. Yes, you can do that. The other part, and most important part of Article 3 is what's not there. There is no enforcement mechanism in Article 3. Did you know that? The opinion by anybody in the judiciary is only an opinion unless it's upheld and enforced by the executive branch and the legislative branch. We have been at Roe v. Wade is such a lawless decision. Why didn't we hit the streets when babies started being killed? Why? Because we have been taught. The ruling by the Supreme Court is settled law. Not true. Not true. I don't have time to get into it. It's in the book. Abraham Lincoln disregarded and ignored the Dred Scott ruling. That's the ruling that said blacks were property and upheld slavery. Now, it caused a civil war. But he had every right to ignore the Supreme Court. What did our state legislature do last year? Or the year before, 2 years ago? Overrepeal comes down. It's as bad a ruling, as much a lawless ruling as Roe v. Wade. That's going to completely shred the fabric of the family in this country in the end. It glorifies sexual immorality. It undermines marriage. It sends a message to our children that a man and a woman don't need to be married. You know, you can go to if you want a child, you can go to a fertility clinic and have a child, but you don't need to be married. I mean, that's what's coming. Now, since they've ruled same-sex marriage, especially in the Northeast and especially in Massachusetts where it started, they're teaching preschoolers sexual immorality in their public schools. What did our legislature do? Well, when that passed, if you read Article 3, the state of Texas, along with the 10th Amendment, could have stood up to the Supreme Court. Yes, Obama was president at the time, but you could do it now, and especially now with Trump being president. We could invoke this because Texas has a constitutional amendment defining marriage as one man and one woman. And it has statutes to the same. So what did they do? The county clerks in this state went to the Attorney General for an opinion. What did the Attorney General say? Wrong opinion. He said if it violates your constitution, your conscience, you don't have to issue the same-sex marriage license, but you have to get somebody else to do it. No. The right opinion should have been, if any county clerk issues a same-sex marriage license, they are violating the Texas Constitution and its statutes, and they should be removed from office. That's what we put a bill into the legislature to that effect, and guess what the Republican legislature did? Killed it. Killed it. I don't have time to get into it, but basically it was my senator who killed it. He was chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And the other part was our wonderful House Speaker, Joe Strauss, refused to allow it in the House. And this legislative session, they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing. It's a lawless decision, ladies and gentlemen. There are ways to overturn it. You do not have to pass a constitutional amendment to overturn it. All you have to do is not enforce it. And so, I want to get into discussion with you about any other issues along the same line, but you city council people and you county people are not off the hook either. You school board people are not off the hook either. Our whole system of property taxes, in my opinion, is unconstitutional. This whole notion that an unelected body sets the values on your property and that raises the taxes, and the elected officials, the accountable officials, get by with it because tax rate's the same. But my property taxes in Sugar Land, because they manipulate the appraisal, have gone up 40% in the last 3 years. 40%. Yet the tax rate has gone down by 0.01%. And we're flush with money in Sugar Land. School boards. This group, I hope, will pick up the notion of putting the Bible back in our public schools. Let's say, we'll be sued. No. I'm hooked up with a group called, what do I call it? Now I'm having a senior moment. Essentials in Education. Essentials in Education. That has already put the Bible in 150 Texas high schools as an elective course. Over 1,400 Texas schools of all types are taking this course. It's the Bible, not proselytizing, is teaching the Bible. The Bible is the foundation of our literature, our art, our everything. You can't teach American literature without teaching the Bible. So we have the Essentials in Education has developed a very legitimate curriculum that can be taught in our public schools. And I would hope that you would demand of the school districts in this area to implement that. We're also in the process of writing a curriculum for the Constitution.
Yeah.
We have to. Yeah. This country will not survive unless we put the Bible back into the schools and we teach our school. We have 4 generations now that no clue how many amendments there are to the Constitution, nor do they care. No clue. We have to get control of our public schools. And we have to get control of our public universities. There is no reason in God's wonderful grace that we have the University of Texas as one of the most liberal schools in the United States that represents the state of Texas, other than Austin, the People's Republic of Austin. The rest of the state are God-fearing, constitutional-fearing people. And yet we allow the governor to appoint people to the Board of Regents that continue this. That continue brainwashing our children. And Aggies aren't off the hook either. Texas, my daughter graduated from Texas A&M. The things I could tell you about Texas A&M right now, it ain't the school it was 10, 15 years ago. I'm telling you. We have got to get a hold of these and set as an example for the rest of the country that we will not stand for leftists to do what they're doing to our children in the state.
That's right. That's right.
Now, I have just made a lot of elected officials mad. You know, most of the state legislature won't speak to me anymore because I'm challenging them. What major... Now, I am very proud of Dan Patrick to bring the bathroom bill to the state of Texas. And look what it's going through to make that happen. And they're going to have a very hard time getting it through Joe Strauss's house. But we need to be demanding and supporting him in what he is doing. At the same time, we need to be demanding more from him. I don't want any longer for the Republicans to just be a conservative manager of an unconstitutional government. So, that's why I'm here, to encourage you to develop on your own what you want out of these elected officials. Then present it to them. And then stand and hold them accountable that they deliver for you. And don't let them bamboozle you to understand that we're going to repeal Obamacare and replace it. Doesn't need replacing. We need to get back, we need to get the government out of the insurance business, that's for sure. And we need to get the government out of regulating the insurance business so we can have an insurance market. And that could be the replacement. But to just take one welfare program and do a little bit better welfare program, no. And by the way, while I've got your attention, Ivanka wants another welfare program. She wants a child care, easily accessible child care. Easily, the word she used, easily accessible and affordable. Where have we heard that before? Is it Obamacare? That's coming next. Is federally run child care. Then they've really got your children. They've got them in the schools, they've got them in child care, they've got them, and there ain't no turning them loose. We can't allow this to happen. We cannot allow this to happen. And it starts with our local elected officials and get them to talk in the right talk. Going to your state legislators and getting them to talk the right talk. And when the governor of the state of Texas says he wants to expand public schools to preschool, let him know that you ain't going to get my child.
Yeah.
You're not going to get my child. You're not going to get them way when they ought to be at home with their mother and their father, being raised by their mother and their father, and developing values from that. The state of Texas has no business expanding the age of children that go into our public schools. I tell you, it is bad policy. So anyway, let's talk. I've done enough. Yes, ma'am.
I've been homeschooling for the last 8 years. We pay ISD taxes, but we buy our own curriculum. And we do that out of the doctors who want our children to have a free place. So what would you recommend for homeschoolers? There's a huge community of homeschoolers.
Very simple.
People would love
School choice.
we spend this money.
School choice.
We give that dead money to the ISD.
School choice. The money should follow the student, whether they're taught at home, or in the religious schools, or in the charter schools. The money should follow the students, not the teachers or the school districts. And I'm hoping that's happening. The second thing is the Department of Education should be abolished. Yes, sir.